High in the Peruvian Andes, there's an ancient city called Machu Picchu. It is a ruin that defies explanation. Who were the mysterious people who built it? And why did they build it here? With no defensive wall, it doesn't look like a fortress. Instead, there are fountains and small pools, temples, and strange altars cut from granite. But little else to explain how a people who didn't have iron tools or the wheel could have created such a masterpiece. And why? Now, new research is solving these mysteries in the bodies and bones of the people who once lived here.
To me, this is the type of injury more indicative of a weapon, possibly of warfare.
There are clues far below the city and underneath it. And in the stories of the mummies of kings. Will all these revelations finally lay the ghosts of Machu Picchu to rest? Perched at 2,450 meters on a narrow ridge in the high Andes, Machu Picchu is a remote and mysterious ancient wonder. Spread across the top of this ridge are more than 200 structures, each built with exquisitely cut stone. Some appear to be homes, others temples. They surround a half-hectare green, and all are fed by open waterways and fountains. It is a lost city, whose doorways and passages hint at the ghosts of its past. A place that is at once beautiful and baffling. There are no written clues in the city, no carvings to suggest a purpose. At its highest point, the mystery only deepens. There, a beautifully carved pillar stands, a graceful riddle to cap the sight. From this lofty height, the views leave one stunned, but also curious. How did the builders get all this stone up here, and then cut it so finely that they didn't even need mortar to hold their walls in place? Who built Machu Picchu? And why did they build it in this impossible place? Even more perplexing, why did they abandon it? Throughout the city, stones seemed to be on the verge of being placed when work came to a stop. Now, as never before, clues are emerging. Some at the site itself in new excavations. Others at the lower reaches of Machu Picchu, as teams explore them for the very first time. These mysteries have long obsessed Fernando Estete, director of the Machu Picchu Archaeological Park.
There is such an important cultural legacy here, not just for Peruvians, but the legacy for the entire world.
Making sense of that legacy is Astete's challenge, along with getting to work. He has one of the most precarious commutes of anyone on the planet. His path was built by a people who were sure-footed, with little fear of heights. The Inca. They rose to power in the mid-1400s, in part because they built such good roads. Much of their 16,000-kilometer network is still visible today. They left other evidence that they were master engineers and builders. Their terraces, canals, and stone cities rival those of ancient Rome. But unlike the ancient Romans, they did all of this without the wheel, without iron, and without a written language. The Inca did have a calculating system using knotted strings called quipu, but it left no record of their lives or their history. So much of what we do know comes from the Spanish who conquered them in the 1500s. These accounts carry the bias of conquerors. A different view comes from an Inca artist named Guaman Poma. Poma was born shortly after the Spanish arrived in Peru, so he was an observer who bridged both worlds. He produced hundreds of simple drawings about farming techniques, royalty, and the Inca history of conquest. From both these sources, we know the Inca were fierce warriors who subjugated dozens of different peoples, forging them into one of the largest empires in the world, stretching some 3,800 kilometers. They fed their people by transforming steep slopes into farmland, with the rise and run of terracing. It's believed that more land was under cultivation during Inca times than is today in modern Peru. But the most surprising detail about the Inca is that they ruled for only 100 years. Then their empire was decimated, first by disease, then civil war, finally the Spanish conquistadors. From the Spanish, we know that the last Inca emperor retreated into the mountains to a city called Vilcabamba. The Inca held out at Vilcabamba for 35 years, until finally, in 1572, the Spanish destroyed the city. Strangely, they left no written record of where it was located. And the legend of the lost city of Vilcabamba was born. It was a mystery that had powerful allure. Almost 350 years later, it pulled an American explorer named Hiram Bingham here on a quest to find it. On the morning of July 24th, 1911, Bingham, camera at the ready, reached the top of a ridge and stepped into history. It fairly took my breath away, he later wrote. Bingham's photos marked one of the first times that a moment of discovery had been captured on film. Today, those pictures are part of a rare 23-volume Explorer's album detailing Bingham's discovery. But what exactly had he found? He called it by its local name, Machu Picchu. But he thought it was the lost city of Vilcabamba. A year later, when his team discovered over 100 burials, Bingham believed he'd found the evidence to make his case. After thorough examination, Bingham and his bone expert, Dr. George Eaton, reached an astonishing conclusion. 80% of the dead were women.
Eaton's data gave a sex ratio of 4 to 1, 4 times as many females as males. 4 to 1 really would be a tremendous bias. And I think that's what got Eaton excited. He thought, my God, they're almost all women.
What could explain a predominantly female cemetery? Bingham thought he'd found the remains of the so-called Virgins of the Sun. According to Spanish accounts, the most beautiful girls in the empire were chosen for this sacred convent. Selected around the age of 8, these virgins served the Inca emperor for the rest of their lives. Bingham guessed that when the last Inca king retreated into the mountains to escape the Spanish, he took his sacred virgins with him. So it all added up. The skeletons of the virgins confirmed that this spectacular city in the sky had to be Vilcabamba.
Clearly for him, it created a great magical, romantic kind of picture that made good book reading.
When published in the April 1913 issue of National Geographic, the story was an overnight sensation. Bingham became a star. The only problem was that the theory was wrong. Investigations of other Inca ruins revealed that the Spanish desecrated almost every Inca holy site they could find. At Machu Picchu, the entire city remained untouched. But the most convincing evidence against Bingham's theory was in the very bones he had found at the site. When forensic anthropologist John Verano re-examined them, he found that the sex of the skeletons was almost evenly split. A far cry from Eaton's 4 to 1 ratio. To figure out the sex of a skeleton, you have to compare it across many ethnic and racial groups. Eaton's references were limited to people of European or African descent.
People in the Andes are relatively short, delicately built. Can only guess that what he was looking at was bone size, and he said, this looks like a small person, therefore it's female.
In Bingham's collection, Verano also found the bones of several children, and children and virgins just didn't add up.
I can't find evidence to support that idea that these were virgins of the sun. I think that can be pretty well ruled out.
Without the virgins or any sign of Spanish desecration, there was no proof to support Bingham's theory that this was Vilcabamba. So what was it?